I wanted whatever you impressed upon me to want. And now the debt comes due. A debt you are happy enough to pay.
A sacrifice. A sacrifice made for the stability of the realm.
Hey everyone, Crowfood's daughter here, and if you click this video, you have reached the Disputed Lands. Today's video is a continuation of our Azor Ahai prophecy series, where we have been examining the third head of the dragon. In part 1, we took a closer look at the prophecy itself and discovered that this long-awaited savior is referred to as a dragon, and the significance this one word has in relation to the prophecy itself. In part 2, we discussed the third head of the dragon, and how this third head might not be the hero we were expecting, and instead might represent the more malign version of Azor Ahai found in the ancient tales of the Night's King and Bloodstone Emperor. And through this examination, it was revealed Euron is planning to awaken and become this evil aspect of Azor Ahai, with the target for his ascension being the Hightower on Battle Isle. But with all of this about to go down, a wild card remains: the mysterious Lord Leyton Hightower, who will be taking center stage very soon. Now let's get started. So, House Hightower is one of the oldest noble houses of Westeros, ruling Old Town since the Dawn Age. House Hightower was also instrumental with both the founding of the Citadel and the initial acceptance of the Faith of the Seven during the time of the Andal invasion. And to this day, House Hightower continues to be great patrons of both learning and the faith, with members of the house often joining the ranks of both institutions. House Hightower's seat in Old Town is also of great importance as the second largest city in Westeros and the center of trade in the West. And it's due to this robust trade that House Hightower is also amongst the wealthiest of the noble houses of Westeros. Due to the Hightower's prominence, wealth, influence, and connections to both the Citadel and the Faith of the Seven, Lord Leyton Hightower, the current head of House Hightower, remains one of the most powerful lords in Westeros. But we have yet to meet him on page. According to Paved, in the A Feast for Crows prologue, he hasn't descended from the Hightower in a decade, leaving fans to speculate on why such an important character would be off-page and unwilling to leave his tower for so long. And with the Old Town plot coming to the fore with Euron's upcoming invasion of Old Town, Leyton himself is being set up as a Chekhov's gun, ready to go off in the winds of winter. But Leyton isn't the only person atop the Hightower. Let's take a look. They have taken Stonecrab Cay, the Isle of Pigs, and the Mermaid's Palace, and there are other nests on Horseshoe Rock and the Bastard's Cradle. Without Lord Redwine's fleet, we lack the ships to come to grips with them. "What is Lord Hightower doing?" Sam blurted. "My father always said he was as wealthy as the Lannisters, and could command thrice as many swords as any of Highgarden's other bannermen." "More if he sweeps the cobblestones," the captain said. "But swords are no good against the Iron Men unless the men who wield them know how to walk on water. The Hightower must be doing something." To be sure, Lord Leyton's locked atop his tower with the Mad Maid, consulting books of spells. Might be he'll raise an army from the deeps. Or not. Baelor's building ships, Gunther has charge of the harbor, Garth is training new recruits, and Humphrey's gone to lease 2 higher sail sails. In Samuel 5 of A Feast for Crows, we learn that as the Ironborn continue to advance toward Old Town, preparing for an invasion, Lord Leyton is purportedly locked atop his tower with the Mad Maid, consulting books of spells. The Mad Maid in question is his eldest daughter, Melora, who remains unmarried despite being in her 40s, which is unusual for a noblewoman in Westerosi society. But aside from that, we know little else, further adding to the mystery. And there have been several theories postulating on what could be going on. A popular theory suggests that Leyton hasn't left his tower because, well, he's dead. This theory suggests that Leyton hasn't left his tower for a decade because he died 10 years ago, and his daughter, the Mad Maid, has been ruling Old Town in his stead. Other theories suggest Leyton and his daughter have taken alternative identities and can be found in the present storyline. One of the most popular is that Melora has been masquerading as Septa Lemore, and Leyton as Haldon Halfmaester. Another theory suggests that Leyton is posing as Marwyn the Mage, and his daughter Melora is the Shadowbinder Quaithe. And with all that out of the way, the issue I have with these theories is that they all hinge on one assumption, that either Leyton or both Leyton and Melora haven't been seen by anyone in 10 years, and that isn't what the text is saying. Let's take another look. And beyond, where the honey wine widened into whispering sound, rose the Hightower, its beacon fires bright against the dawn. From where it stood atop the bluffs of Battle Island, its shadow cut the city like a sword. Those born and raised in Old Town could tell the time of day by where the shadow fell. Some claimed that a man could see all the way to the wall from the top. Perhaps that was why Lord Leyton had not made the descent in more than a decade, preferring to rule the city from the clouds. What the text is saying is that Leyton hasn't left the Hightower. Leaving your office and keep to assume another identity for 10 years isn't something that could be pulled off without anyone noticing. As the Lord governing Old Town, he has a duty to hold court and administer justice. And if all this were true, and he had been missing from the Hightower for a decade and posing as someone else, this would assume that Leyton wouldn't be recognized by anyone while posing as Marwyn, or that Haldon wouldn't have been recognized by Tyrion. Leyton being Archmaester Marwyn would mean that he would not be recognized by anyone in the Citadel, and that he wasn't recognized while training as a maester before leaving for his journeys in the east, and that he wasn't recognized upon his return back to Old Town. And all that would be very hard to pull off within the confines of his own city. If Leyton was posing as Haldon, that would mean that he has gone unrecognized by Tyrion. Now Leyton we know was present at the tourney in Lannisport. Leyton was also likely present at the marriage of King Robert to Cersei, to name just a few. The fact of the matter is that Leyton is a powerful lord, and Tyrion has probably had several opportunities beyond this to meet him. In fact, Tywin tried to betroth Tyrion to one of Leyton's daughters. So if Leyton is posing as Haldon, that would mean that Tyrion had no clue. And if he hasn't been seen by anyone in 10 years, this would go against the captain inspecting the cinnamon wind telling Sam that he's up in the tower consulting books of spells. But if Leyton hasn't left the Hightower in a decade, what exactly is he doing up there, and why hasn't he left? Well, that leads us to consider another theory, that Leyton knows more about the plot and about what is about to happen to Old Town than we realize. Or said another way, the Long Night prophecy is about to be fulfilled. The doom is coming to Old Town, and Leyton knows it is close at hand. Let's take a closer look. If you recall, the text states, "Those born and raised in Old Town could tell the time of day by where that shadow fell." Some claim that a man could see all the way to the wall from the top. Perhaps that was why Lord Leyton had not made the descent in more than a decade, preferring to rule his city from the clouds. That was the prologue of A Feast for Crows. In the prologue of the very next book, A Dance with Dragons, we see an echo of this very same comment. "Some skins you never want to wear, boy. You won't like what you'd become." Birds were the worst, to hear him tell it. Men were not meant to leave the earth. Spend too much time in the clouds, and you may never want to come back down again. So men were not meant to leave the earth. Spend too much time in the clouds, and you may never want to come back down again. And we have Lord Leyton not coming down from the Hightower for a decade, ruling his city from the clouds. While Leyton is probably not up in the Hightower skin changing and using magical sight to see through the eyes of birds, what is rumored that you can see from the top of the Hightower is the wall. It's a seemingly throwaway line because, yes, they're both incredibly tall structures, but the distance between the 2 points is so far away that this really wouldn't be possible. And although this is seemingly a baseless rumor, it's one that may actually be giving us a clue. What if there's an ounce of truth to these rumors? We know that the High Tower itself is an incredibly ancient structure erected during the Age of Heroes and is rumored to have been built by Brandon the Builder. And while it is up for debate as to whether Brandon the Builder truly built this or any of the structures attributed to him, we do know that the other two structures attributed to Brandon the Builder do have certain magical qualities. We see that Storm's End has a magic within that Melisandre's shadow magic cannot pass. As she tells Davos, there are spells woven into the stones, dark walls that no shadow can pass, ancient, forgotten, yet still in place. And we see a similar magic within the wall. I have dreamed of your wall, Jon Snow. Great was the lore that raised it, and great the spells locked beneath its ice. We walk beneath one of the hinges of the world. And in the Melisandre chapter of Dance, she has this to say about the wall's magic. She was stronger at the wall, stronger even than in Asshai. Her every word and gesture was more potent. She could do things that she had never done before. So, because these other two ancient and massive structures attributed to Brandon the Builder have magical properties, it's quite possible the High Tower structure could share similar qualities as well. And this is where it gets interesting. In addition to this, the A Feast for Crows appendix also mentions that House Hightower has a history of dabbling in alchemy, necromancy, and other sorcerous arts. Knowing that we get this cryptic line about House Hightower having a history of dabbling in sorcery, it's quite possible that Leyton is fully aware of the fate of Oldtown and the long night to come, through visions seen in the flame atop the High Tower. A similar theory suggests that Leyton is in possession of a glass candle. In the prologue of A Feast for Crows, the same chapter where we learn about Leyton ruling a city from the clouds, we also learn that the Citadel is in possession of 4 glass candles, one of which is used during the initiation of acolytes into the Order of Maesters. And another character, Marwyn, who is also in possession of a glass candle, was very much aware of the events happening at the wall. And we do know that there are some glass candles in Old Town that are unaccounted for. Being that the Hightowers are the benefactors and protectors of the Citadel, it wouldn't be out of the question if the Hightowers had access to those candles. We also know that House Hightower has a history of dabbling in sorcery and other dark arts, and there are rumors of Leyton and his daughter using magic. So Leyton being in possession of a glass candle and having the knowledge to use one is a possibility. So basically, we know that House Hightower is sitting on what is about to become ground zero for the apocalypse. We know that they have a mysterious history with its members dabbling in sorcery. We see the mention of Leyton not coming down from the High Tower in the prologue of A Feast for Crows has very similar wording to another type of magical seeing described in the prologue of the book that followed, hinting that House Hightower could have knowledge of things to come. Of all the theories of what House Hightower could be up to, this is the one that I lean toward. And it's because of this line right here. Without Lord Redwine's fleet, we lack the ships to come to grips with them. What is Lord Hightower doing? Sam blurted. My father always said he was as wealthy as the Lannisters, and could command thrice as many swords as any of Highgarden's other bannermen. More if he sweeps the cobblestones, the captain said. But swords are no good against the Iron Men unless the men who wield them know how to walk on water. The Hightower must be doing something. To be sure, Lord Leyton's locked atop his tower with the Mad Maid, consulting books of spells. Might be he'll raise an army from the deeps, or not. Baelor's building ships, Gunther has charge of the harbor, Garth is training new recruits, and Humphrey's gone to Lys to hire sail sails. We see rumors of Leyton and the Mad Maid consulting books of magic in preparation for Euron's invasion, which wouldn't make a lot of sense if the threat was simply a strategic one, which is why the Old Town captain inspecting the Cinnamon Wind joked that maybe they are raising an army from the deep, which is in reference to another historical invasion of the Reach, when King Myrn the Madling relied on a woods witch who claimed she could raise armies of the dead to throw back the Andal invasion. And yes, consulting books of spells isn't a terribly appropriate response if the threat is a large fleet of sailors and reavers. However, If the Hightowers knew there was an imminent magical threat, consulting books of magic to research and find a way to fight it or prevent it from happening would actually make a lot of sense. In fact, this is exactly what the Night's Watch did when they realized the long night would soon be upon them. Did you find who the others are, where they come from, what they want? Not yet, my lord, but it may be that I've just been reading the wrong books. There are hundreds I have not looked at yet. Give me more time, and I will find whatever there is to be found. Also, this might explain other curious things. For example, Lord Leyton has been cloistered in the Hightower since 290 AC, and the last known public event he attended was the tourney in Lannisport in 289 AC, where he gave his daughter Lynessa's hand in marriage to Ser Jorah Mormont. And many readers have contemplated why Leyton Hightower agreed to this match. As a young and beautiful daughter of a wealthy and powerful house like House Hightower, it's unlikely Ser Jorah was the first suitor to suggest a match. And as a minor lord, twice Lynessa's age, from a remote island in the north, Jorah wouldn't have necessarily been an ideal match, leading fans to question why Leyton agreed to this. Even Jorah himself mentioned the same, stating that by rights he should have gotten a contemptuous refusal, but instead, Leyton accepted his offer. But if Leyton did have knowledge of the long night to come, it starts to make sense, because Jorah wasn't just a minor lord from the north. He was the son of the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. This would also explain why Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Runsel Hightower, wanted to make the office of the Lord Commander hereditary through the line of House Hightower. And this knowledge of the second coming of the Long Night would also explain the motivation for the Grand Maester conspiracy and the dying of the dragons. In Part 2, we discussed the return of this evil aspect of Azor Ahai, this prophesied dragon of sorts, and how the target for this ascension will be the Hightower on Battle Isle. Now, we are told that even at the beginning of written history, the island where the Hightower is situated has been known as Battle Isle, and not much other information is given. But we do know that an ancient battle took place that was significant enough to give the island its name. In Part 2, we discussed the inspiration George R.R. Martin drew from Tad Williamson's Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the reawakening of the Storm King occurs at the place of his death, and because we are given some information about a mysterious battle taking place on Battle Isle, if our author is intending this reawakening as a parallel to the other series, then Battle Isle is likely where this evil aspect of Azor Ahai was eventually brought down. And the person responsible for putting an end to him was likely King Uthor, the progenitor of House Hightower, because in the World Book we are told that dragons once roosted on Battle Isle until the first Hightower put an end to them. You see, if Azor Ahai is referred to as a dragon in the prophecy, this means that the original Azor Ahai was most likely a dragon lord, and we have hints of the Proto-Valyrian dragon lords of the Great Empire of the Dawn having a presence in Old Town due to the presence of the fused stone base of the Hightower. And in legend, it was Uthor who put an end to them. We also see a hint of this in the Westerland section of the World Book. Archmaester Periston has put forth a different, more plausible speculation, suggesting that the Valyrians had in ancient days reached as far as Old Town, but suffered some great reverse or tragedy there that caused them to shun all of Westeros thereafter. This passage suggests that Valyrians were present in Old Town, but a great tragedy or event happened that caused them to shun all of Westeros from there on. Now, we know from all of the evidence laid forth in the World of Ice and Fire that the fused stone base of the Hightower was likely the result of pre-Valyrian construction, similar to that of the Great Empire of the Dawn. Valyria itself rose after the end of the Long Night, and after the fall of the Great Empire. So really, this passage should be taken into the context of the Great Empire, rather than Valyria. And what it's really telling us is that the Great Empire reached as far as Old Town, but suffered a great reverse or tragedy. And the man who was in control of the Great Empire during the Long Night was the Bloodstone Emperor, or, said another way, was Azor Ahai. And if Dragon Lords were present in Old Town, you can bet that they were brought down by King Uthor. Because a simple way to identify who the winner was is to look at who was left standing. And House Hightower has ruled Old Town since that time. And we are told that King Uthor was the one who put an end to the dragons who roosted on Battle Isle. Furthermore, in my Ironborn series of videos discussing the Grey King as part of the Azor Ahai monomyth, we also explored the different variations of both Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa throughout the myths and legends of the world Martin has created. And one of these variations of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa can be found in the tales of Argoth Stoneskin and Maris the Maid, where again we see this conflict with the first Hightower. Maris the Maid, the most fair, whose beauty was so renowned that 50 lords vied for her hand at the first tourney ever to be held in Westeros. The victor was the grey giant Argoth Stoneskin, but Maris wed King Uthor of the Hightower before he could claim her, and Argoth spent the rest of his days raging outside the walls of Old Town, roaring for his bride. So there are several hints pointing toward the Hightower progenitor putting an end to the original nefarious aspect of Azor Ahai, and to this day the noble house has their seat on the site where his spirit is to be reawakened. If this is true, if House Hightower was integral in the downfall of the original Azor Ahai, and if this metaphorical dragon is to return as the prophecy suggests, then chances are House Hightower has always known, which is probably why Martin decided to give them an ancestral sword named Vigilance. And when Aegon and his sisters invaded Westeros with the banner of a 3-headed dragon, it's likely House Hightower saw this as a sign that the prophecy would soon be fulfilled. However, instead of openly opposing Aegon and his sisters, he met Aegon with open arms and open gates. 300 years ago, when Aegon the Dragon landed beneath this very hill, the High Septon locked himself within the starry sept of Old Town and prayed for 7 days and 7 nights, taking no nourishment but bread and water. When he emerged, he announced that the faith would not oppose Aegon and his sisters, for the crone had lifted up her lamp to show him what lay ahead. If Old Town took up arms against the dragon, Old Town would burn, and the Hightower and the Citadel and the Starry Sept would be cast down and destroyed. So, if House Hightower was aware of this prophesied dragon's eventual return, it's quite possible that House Hightower took great stock in this vision. And since that time, House Hightower would have been operating under the belief that if they did anything to openly oppose it, they would be destroyed. Which leads us to the Maester Conspiracy and the Dying of the Dragons. Basically, the Grand Maester Conspiracy is a well-regarded theory in the fandom that suggests the Maesters, certain members of the Faith of the Seven, and House Hightower worked in tandem to cause the events that would lead to the extinction of dragons and the dying of magic in the known world, as well as orchestrating the alliances that led to Robert's Rebellion and the fall of House Targaryen. In fact, there's so much evidence for this, it's almost canon, due to comments made by both Barbary Dustin as well as Archmaester Marwyn. And just about every A Song of Ice and Fire creator has at least one video addressing this topic. The thing that has always bothered me about the Maester Conspiracy was there was a really good amount of evidence to support this, but there was never a solid understanding of the actual motivation behind it. The only answers being the Maesters don't like magic, or the Hightowers felt the Targaryens had too much power, which are just kind of broad generalizations. It's kind of like saying they orchestrated this incredibly elaborate, multifaceted, cross-generational, 300-year-long conspiratorial quest that ultimately led to the Dance of the Dragons, Robert's Rebellion, and the fall of House Targaryen, because they just didn't like it. But if House Hightower was aware of the return of the Long Night, and the reawakening of the enemy their family defeated, and felt House Targaryen could somehow fulfill this prophesied dragon's return, well, that would be some pretty good motivation. George R. R. Martin has been quoted as saying that the villains are the heroes of the other side.
The greatest monsters of history, as we look back on them, thought they were the heroes of the story. You know, the villain is the hero of the other side, as sometimes said.
And if true, then House of the Dragon isn't a show about one family with the fate of the world on their shoulders, motivated by prophecy.
When this great winter comes, Rhaenyra, all of Westeros must stand against it. And if the world of men is to survive, a Targaryen must be seated on the Iron Throne. A king or queen, strong enough to unite the realm against the cold.
It's about two families, and the prophecies they are motivated by serve in direct conflict with one another. And despite everything House Hightower did to prevent it, dragons and magic have returned to the world, and the long night will soon be upon them. Leyton has been in the Hightower for 10 years, waiting and preparing for this day. And with Euron's ascension soon upon them, this day will be coming soon, and with it, the ushering in of the long night. If you like this video and would like to help my channel, please be sure to like and leave a comment. It really does help. A huge shout out goes to the channel members who support my channel. Thank you so much.